Have you ever opened your retirement account, looked at the number, and thought, I should have saved more? Maybe you've been responsible with money for years. You saved when you could, avoided serious debt, maybe built some investments along the way. But once you get into your 50s, that number starts to feel different. Retirement is no longer far away. You start thinking about how long the money has to last and whether what you've built is really enough. If that sounds familiar, I want to show you another way to look at the next 10 years. Your savings matter, but they may not be the only thing that matters anymore. For years, the retirement advice has been pretty simple. Save, invest, let the money grow. Good advice. But if you reach 50 or 55 and the number isn't where you hoped it would be, the natural reaction is to try to catch up. Maybe you put away a little more each month or decide to work a few extra years. That can help. But there's another question I think it's worth asking at this age. What if the next 10 years are also about finding a different way to earn? You know, you're bringing something into these years that you didn't have at 30. Experience. You've made decisions, dealt with difficult people, and learned what usually goes wrong before it happens. Some of that knowledge may have value outside the job where you learned it. Let me make that real for a second. Maybe it's knowing how to calm down an angry client before it becomes a real problem. Maybe it's reading a contract and spotting the clause that's going to cause trouble in a year. Maybe it's just knowing from doing it 100 times which decision is the one people will regret later. None of that shows up on a resume, but somebody out there may be stuck on exactly that problem right now, and your experience could save them a lot of time. And that's why it can change the way you look at your financial future. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're 55 and decide to save an extra $500 every month for the next 10 years. If that money earns around 4% a year, you would have roughly $73,000 at the end. Useful money. Now imagine that somewhere inside your experience there's one problem you know how to solve really well. You find 2 people a month willing to pay you $500 to help them with it. 2 paid conversations. That gives you $1,000 a month, or $120,000 in gross income over 10 years. Now, savings and income are obviously different. There can be taxes and expenses on the income side. I'm not trying to pretend these are identical. Now, you might be thinking, but that $500 a month isn't guaranteed the way savings growth is. And you'd be right. 4% isn't guaranteed either. Markets move. The difference is that with income, some of the variables are in your hands. You can talk to people, improve what you offer, and get better at solving the problem. You're trying to find 2 people this month who need the kind of help you already know how to give. There's another kind of compounding here too, one that doesn't show up in a savings calculator. The first paid conversation is usually the hardest. The second one is easier, because now you've actually done it once. By the 5th or 6th, you understand the conversation much better. You know what people ask, where they get stuck, and how you can help them. That's compounding too. It just doesn't happen in a bank account. I'm showing you that saving may not be your only lever. You may also be able to create income from what you already know. And if you're over 50, that possibility is worth taking it seriously. I think about this myself because I'm 10 years beyond 50. Of course, I care about what I've saved, but I also don't want my whole financial future to depend on a number I spent the last 30 years building. Here's the thing. During those same 30 years, I was building something else. Your retirement account has been compounding. So have you. Here's what I've noticed about experience though. The thing you're best at usually feels the least impressive to you, because it comes easily. If it takes you 5 minutes to solve a problem, It's tempting to assume it must be worth 5 minutes. But the value was never in the time it took. It was in the years it took to get fast at it. 5 years ago, I started a newsletter for luxury travel professionals. At the time, it barely felt like starting anything. I already knew this industry, how advisors actually talk to each other, what they struggle with that they would never say out loud to a client. Writing it down felt almost too easy to count as real work. Then one day, a luxury travel advisor read a few issues and asked me something simple. Could I write her newsletter for her? That's when it clicked. What felt obvious to me was valuable to her because she didn't know how to do it herself. That's the trap with experience. The things that feel obvious to you can still be very valuable to someone who hasn't spent years learning them. So alongside the question, do I have enough saved? I think there's another one worth asking. What can I still create from what I know? You may not be able to change what you've saved 20 years ago. You can still make decisions about what you build over the next 10. Think about the last few times someone came to you because they trusted your opinion. What were they actually asking you to help with? Write those situations down and see whether the same problem keeps showing up. Then pick one person who has that problem and have a real conversation with them. That's enough for now. You don't need to know where this leads yet. You're simply testing whether something you know can be useful enough that another person values your help. So if you're over 50 and worried that you haven't saved enough, keep saving where you can. I do. But I wouldn't let the balance in that account tell me everything about what the next 10 years can look like. You still have time ahead of you, and you're carrying decades of experience into those years. Some of that experience may be worth something to somebody else, and if you can turn even a small part of it into income, you give yourself another option. That's the important part for me. Knowing that the future hasn't been completely decided by what I managed to save in the past, and that I may still have some influence over what happens next. If you're trying to figure out what that could look like for you, subscribe to the Rewired Life newsletter. I write about turning what you already know into something useful and potentially profitable. The link is below. And if you want to know exactly how to turn that first conversation into a paying client without a website or an audience, watch this video right here.